Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Homegrown Hip, brought to you by B-Town Jazz and jazzbooks.com. I'm John Porter, president of B-Town Jazz, and this month we are truly proud to present the one and only Mike Lucas. Many of you know Mike as a fantastic piano player, former professor of jazz studies at the IU Jacobs School of Music, leader of the B-Town Bearcats, and the music director of the legendary Al Cobain Big Band. I'm especially excited about this episode because I get to sit down and talk one-on-one with Mike about his illustrious, storied career. But now, from here on out, it's Mike Lucas. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being part of our series, Homegrown Hip. We relish any opportunity to work with you at the B-Town Jazz Festival and anything that you do to contribute to our efforts. So thank you for being here.
I'm honored to be included.
Wonderful. I'd like to first start out with a little bit about your background for those who may not know you. Where you grew up, did you have a musical family, and how did you become a musician as your profession?
Well, I was born in Muncie and then lived in Marion, Indiana. My first musical introduction to music was through an old piano that my one pair of grandparents had, and my aunts and older cousins would bang around on it, and they would. One of the things when I realized I was maybe 3 years old, but realized they were doing Blue Moon, and they were doing it like this. And then they'd play the melody. And I was listening to that and said, that is not right. And they, so I said, let me try it, and I went. See, they were playing on all black keys. They had never had a lesson in their life. They just, it's just something that one child learns from another child and passes on. So I realized kind of then that, maybe I'm hearing something that other people aren't hearing. But my first piano lessons were when I was 6 years old with a woman named Lorraine Slinger. And she was quite the grand old lady, chain smoked during the lessons, and very blustery woman. But she had been a silent movie pianist in her youth, and she was a good organist and a pretty good classical player. But she had the stride and the barrel house kind of piano down, just wonderful. And she was a legend in her time. And I was taking piano lessons, and I was playing the John W. Schaum, or whatever they were, John Thompson. And I said, I don't like this music. It's boring. It's awful. She said, what do you want to play? I said, well, how about Stars and Stripes Forever? She said, go home and figure it out and bring it back to me next week. So I did, and my parents were a little perplexed that I wasn't playing my lessons. And again, I think it was a matter of an accidental. I was playing it. And she said, now listen, where's that note? I remember her, saying, oh yeah. The black notes are your friends too. You can play them. And so every lesson from that point on, I brought in an improvised piece. And so I started improvising and using my ears. Then we moved, or my father changed jobs, to Marion, and then I got with a teacher that was strictly classical. And she drilled the scales and arpeggios and the theory into me, and which was a wonderful thing. The piano lessons led finally to forming a Dixieland band with some high school friends, and we actually got a gigging band out of it, and then started taking the Dixieland into the cool school, the Miles Davis things. We never quite got into Charlie Parker. Too many notes for us, But Miles we could relate to, and the Lester Young thing. So we kind of did that, and so
very cool.
That's right. And my family was not. My father was a great singer, but as far as musical knowledge, he had almost none. And never had any education. My grandfather was a clarinetist, and he'd played with John Philip Sousa, but I didn't know him that. He died when I was very young, so he didn't have a musical influence on me. But so
That's amazing.
yeah.
Well, Mike, you're part of a very special club in the Bloomington jazz community. You're the most recent recipient of the Al Colbine Award
Right.
for your dedication to our jazz community and jazz education. And for those people who don't know Al, he was a Bloomington institution, great big band of which you're now the musical director. Can you tell us how you came to know Al?
Yeah, I can. My first exposure to Al was through Buddy Baker, who played trombone for him in the late 50s, early 60s. And he said, and I was a freshman, Buddy was teaching trombone and teaching in the jazz. Before there was a jazz program, he was teaching some in jazz. And he said, there's something you need to see. He says, you need to come to Alumni Hall to hear the Al Colbine Big Band. We're doing a recording session. This was 1960. So I drugged myself to Alumni Hall and parked myself, and from beginning to end and listened to the entire session, and that's when I first, although I didn't introduce myself to Al at that time, I just sat there and listened and absorbed, and it was one of the first stereo recordings I had ever seen, and they used an old Studer 2-track. It was primitive, but the session, which was never released, and none of it was ever released, but Jack Guilfoyle found a tape of that session, and it was actually pretty good. It sounds pretty good. And the musicianship was superb. Anyway, that was my introduction to Al through Buddy Baker. And then Al said, Buddy said, I'll let Al know that you might be available to play some of the time. And so I got a few 7-piece gigs with Al and the 7-piece band. And when Tom Hensley couldn't make it, I got a few big band gigs. Scary, very scary. Tom never, when there was a mistake in the part, Tom never marked it. He just memorized it. And so when a new guy came in and read the book, he stepped into bear traps. Bars missing, whole bars wrong, and just normal copy mistakes. But anyway, I got into it, and then Hensley decided to go off completely on his own, and then Al asked me if I would play with the band, and so I did.
Wonderful. Dominic Spira once told me that a big reason why he came to Bloomington was because of the Al Colbine Big Band. What was so special about Al as a band leader and his writing style?
Well, as a band leader, it's more the human side of him. He was just such a warm and outgoing human being. And he exuded that from the bandstand. In terms of his writing, it's very difficult to put your finger on exactly what makes his writing unique, except that Al was trained and his mindset was a vocalist. It was in vocal music, so he looked at lines rather than harmonies.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things he told me. He says, I tried to never write a part, even the, and it was a 3-tenor book. He said, even the third tenor that didn't flow well, that didn't make sense. He said and when I look at his charts, and that's what he did.
Yeah, they're so singable.
Yeah, it's lyrical. So, I mean, he was a lyrical arranger and composer. The other thing is that he said he wrote his book, or he tried to write his book, but some of it, it's not so that it could be sight read by competent musicians. So he wouldn't have to have rehearsals constantly. If he wrote a new chart, he wouldn't have to call the whole band.
Sure.
And like I say, there's a few tunes that that's a big lie. They were hard.
Yeah.
But so I would just attribute to his lyricism.
Yeah.
And that approach to arranging and composing.
One of my first introductions to jazz as a young musician, and one of my all-time loves of the music is Dixieland. And my father introduced the trumpet and jazz music to me via an album by Louis Armstrong at the Newport Jazz Festival. And I loved how much fun everyone was having on the recording. The joy was just ebullient, and it was quite an amazing album. I know that Dixieland music is a very special part of your repertoire, and can you tell us a little bit about your band, the B-Town Bearcats?
Yeah, I played in a band here in town with Jack Host, who recently passed away, called Cafe Jazz Society. And for various reasons, Jack decided to disband the band. And I just felt a need that we needed to have in Bloomington a Dixieland, a traditional jazz band of good players.
Yeah.
And I'd been working with Robin Hopkins and Kathleen Miller and some people that worked with them and playing in that style. And I more or less imported those people, but along with Phil Slofer on tuba,
Yeah.
and local drummers, to just start a Dixie band and call it the B-Town Bearcats and
Yeah.
play at Bears. That's pretty much what we did.
We love it when you appear at the B-Town Jazz Festival. It's such a fun way to start the day, and
Yeah.
you all sound so good. Well, I've got one more question for you. It's always such a pleasure to watch you perform and, of course, listen to you perform. You have such a good rapport with your sidemen and all the people that you play with. How would you say that you balance the fun side of music and the enjoyment of it with going to work and the business end of it?
Huh. Well, I guess this may not be the answer to your question, but I try to make every gig that I'm on, even though it might not be the best gig in the world, to make it fun.
That's great.
Sometimes that fun is parody. for example, playing the circus. I did some outlandish things from time to time that were humorous, and hopefully they were humorous. But
well, you have a great sense of humor.
And yeah, it was. Yeah, I can't recount anything specific, but yeah, I guess when there was a cue in the circus of the merry-go-round broke down, which was an old Looney Tunes melody.
Yep.
And when I played that on the organ, I mean, I brought the house down.
Wow.
Because the merry-go-round did break down. It was,
Wow.
but yeah, that's what I would say. You know, I try not to have a dark attitude, because it's easy to do.
Sure.
But make the gig as fun as you can and as enjoyable as you can. Bring everything you can to the gig that you can, and remember that it's going to be over. There is a stop time.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it again. You don't. When that person calls again, you can say no.
Well, Mike, that was a great set. It's always a pleasure to hear you play. Thank you so much for being a part of Homegrown Hip, and we look forward to the next opportunity to work together.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for having me.
Our pleasure.
I'd like to thank our special guest once again on Homegrown Hip this month, the great piano player and band leader Mike Lucas, for his truly outstanding performance. Mike, as always, it's great to catch up and hear your wonderful stories. We hope to do it again real soon. Special thanks to our series sponsor, Jamie Abersold at jazzbooks.com, our episode partner, St. Mark's United Methodist Church of Bloomington, Vice President of B-Town Jazz, Chris Parker, for all of his audiovisual expertise, and to all of our community sponsors who support us throughout the year, thank you. To learn more about B-Town Jazz, visit us online at btownjazz.org, where you can make a tax-deductible donation or become a volunteer. Be sure and tune in the first Saturday of every month on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or as always, btownjazz.org for brand new episodes of Homegrown Hip. Locally sourced, always fresh, good for the mind and soul. For B-Town Jazz, I'm John Porter. See you next month.